I think this may be the most requested video for the Patreon, how to do black marble, specifically with a brush. So during the Advent calendar release, I showed you how to do the black marble effect using the baby wipe technique, but this is for the purists. This is for people who don't necessarily own an airbrush, and for those who want to have what I think is the best way to paint marble. So to begin the process, we need to add a very, very strong, consistent black tone on top of anything that we want to paint in the black marble effect. In this case, I'm using Thamar Black. Next up, I use Gloss Varnish from Vallejo Air. This is the polyurethane water soluble stuff, so it's not too aggressive, and we need to allow this to dry for around an hour or so. Next up, we use a mixture of, that's me checking my notes right there, Gloss Varnish, Silver from Vallejo Air, and Ivory from Vallejo Model Color. And we are creating a mixture of roughly a 1 to 1 to 1 for this initial layer. We may want to add a touch more silver and a small amount more ivory for a more consistent coat, but for the beginning process I just want a 1 to 1 to 1 mix. So begin the brush stroke. It would really benefit you, if you're unused to this technique, to take a piece of tracing paper, have some black marble printed out in front of you, and trace around the lines. The lines I trace with the brush, I know the kind of the values I'm trying to get, and so this is an example of it going wrong. What ideally I'd like to do is add that layer, and before it dries I take a clean brush and wipe off the majority of that paint. But in this case, unfortunately, it dried well before I was able to administer that second layer. So no big deal, we just return with black and fill in the gap. The aim here is to have a very thin, spidery line that it goes in a very kind of fractured manner across the miniature. Okay, let's try the experiment again. Same process, adding that line, quickly drying off my brush. With a clean brush I remove the excess. A much more successful case here. Essentially what we are trying to do is create controlled tide marks. Now normally with miniature painting we don't want to have tide marks whatsoever, but with this we need a few lines to give that impression that it's been wiped away, and the slight silver pigmentation will give it those incidental reflection points. Now you can vary the brush stroke between those thick globules of paint that you then lift off later on, and very, very minute, thin, spidery lines created with very little pressure from the tip of the brush, like so. That's the key. You don't only want to have those thick brush strokes that you then remove the majority of the paint, pushing the tip towards the line you wish to keep. You don't only want to have those, you want to break it up with these very, very thin, spidery lines. There's very little pressure I'm applying on the brush here. Again, if we refer to the photo in the notebook, we can see exactly what kind of pattern we are trying to produce. Now, one of the big misconceptions when it comes to marble is that it all flows in one direction. If we take a closer look at the marble example, you can see that there are a few lines running contra to the main embellished lines. So there are big lines that we can kind of see the general flow where pressure's been put on it and created those cracks in the material, but there are contrary lines to that running against that. So it's very important that we do incorporate most of these lines. We can't incorporate all of them just purely because of the scale we're working in, but we do want to give that illusion. For the most part, the lines will be running in one direction, but we do need to break that up with lines running contrary to that. Once we've added a few lines, we can stand back and admire our work. Now, you have to appreciate that this is the culmination of about a year's worth of practice at this point. I'm very aware that I make this look frustratingly easy. You do need to practice this. Please don't, when Sanguinius comes out, please don't buy Sanguinius and then dive straight in thinking you're able to replicate this technique. You will need to practice it 2 or 3 times. It is quite an easy technique to get a handle of, but you need to practice it first. So take up an old miniature, take up an old shin pad or whatever you have, and please practice this technique first. Now, one thing I did notice with this piece is that there's slightly too many spidery lines. It didn't look quite right, so I've added a black Thamar black on the top, and before it fully dries, I take my silver, my white, and my gloss varnish, this time with more white and gloss varnish in the mixture, and I'm able to wet blend this gloss varnish effect. Even for a practiced hand like mine, things still can go wrong. So you can see there, it doesn't really look like marble. It looks like lightning strokes. I don't know what the hell it looks like actually. So again, try the process again, go over it yet again. Refinement, reiteration. So I remember thinking when I was doing this that people won't listen to me if I show them how to do it this way. Because it felt like nothing was going right with this miniature, from the airbrush sputtering to the black marble. Sometimes you'll just roll your brush around the miniature and it will just work and everything falls into place. With this, I really had to fight it at every step. Those things I felt practiced at didn't feel so practiced when I was trying to commit it to video. Let's add those very final few notes. It is worth bearing in mind that even for practice users of this technique, things often do still go wrong. This technique very much relies on chaos. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's not a fault in you. The more you do it, the more practice, the more experienced you'll become, the better you'll be able to deal with the flaws that crop up in the painting process. But that's all it is. We are dealing with the flaws as best as we are able. And after some time, and I'm still trying to get there myself, so don't feel like you're alone in this, hopefully this will become easier for you and you will just have one of those days where every brush stroke is a masterpiece. Unfortunately, this definitely wasn't that piece. I really had to fight and try and get this down. Once you've painted the marble to your satisfaction, and that may be a long time coming because who, if any of us, is really satisfied with our own work, we need to add a final layer of gloss varnish on top of the miniature. And I finally add another layer. Once the gloss varnish is fully dried, I like adding floor polish to the very final layer. It gives the impression of a slightly greasy surface. I'm not sure if greasy is the right word, but a really highly glossed surface. That's it. That's the black marble technique with the brush. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you don't find this too frustrating once you do develop it by yourself. please send me lots of photos if you do try this technique. And if you post it anywhere online, social media, make sure you include a post to the Patreon, because my God, does that help like nothing else that you can do. Thank you very much, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video.